What is UK company law all about? Let's see whether we can answer that question in around 5 minutes. We're all familiar with companies. They're so ubiquitous that we can't escape companies. Look at the map of the United States of America there. You'll recognize a large number, if not all of those companies. Many of us would know what a company is, but not what it is. So we are looking at what exactly does the law regard a company to be? How is it created? What can it do? What can't it do? And then we look at who runs the company. And are there any regulations about who gets to run the company and how do they get to run the company? So we're going to look at directors and what the law says about directors. Who owns the company? This brings us to shareholders and shares. So what is a share? What is a shareholder? What kind of rights and duties do you have as a shareholder? And then how does a share differ from a bond? This brings us to the difference between equity capital in a company and loan capital. We're going to look at the kinds of companies. What is the difference between a private and a public company, for example? And then how does a company come to an end? What is the difference between, for example, administration and insolvent liquidation? On our journey, we're also going to look at certain very interesting things such as mergers and acquisitions, takeovers, the kinds of takeovers that you can get, and we're going to look at insider trading, very exciting areas. But we're also going to look at why would you decide to run your business as a company? Why not do it as a partnership? What's the difference between the two concepts or the two constructs, and why would you choose one over the other? Or why don't you run your business as a sole trader? So we're going to look very shortly also at what is a partnership, what is a sole trader as a business, and we're going to look at the law of agency in a bit of detail, because this is the way in which companies operate, through agents. Now, there are two categories of business organizations in the United Kingdom, those with and those without separate legal personality. Under the former category, we have our sole traders, partnerships, and sort of a hybrid business organization, the limited liability partnership, which you'll be familiar with if you look at the Magic Circle law firms, for example. They're all limited liability partnerships, and we're going to answer the question, why is that? The second category is those business organizations with legal personality. So in other words, the law regards them as a person in the same way as the law regards us as legally capable persons, as humans. These are companies, or also known as corporations. There are certain areas of law that you have to be really very well versed in order to be a good company lawyer. The law of agency, as we've already mentioned, is very important, but so is the law of obligations, broadly speaking, which is made up of the law of contract and the law of tort. The law of contract is obviously important because that's the way in which a company runs a business. If a company employs people, it's through employment contracts. Companies buy and sell things through contracts of sale. So legislation such as the Unfair Contract Terms Act would be very important. Key skill for a corporate lawyer is a very good understanding of contract law. Companies can also be held vicariously liable for what its agents, such as, for example, its directors, do. So the law of tort, very important. Company can be held liable in negligence. Other areas of law also overlap with corporate law. So we have recently business and human rights, but in this case, for example, which we are going to look at in a lot of detail when we look at the separate legal personality of a company, the case of Prest versus Petrodel, we had an overlap of family law, the law of equity and trusts, and company law. Very briefly in this case, Mr. Prest, the director of Petrodel Resources, and his wife got divorced, and she alleged that certain matrimonial properties, such as houses, etc., were taken out of the matrimonial estate and placed in the ownership of the companies run by Mr. Prest. And she said that she was entitled to these properties, whereas the principle of corporate legal personality means that once a company owns something, that property is the property of the company, not of the directors or of the shareholders. Now, the answer to that conundrum was ultimately found in this case in the law of trusts. So we'll look at how did this all shake down in Prest versus Petrodel. So that in a nutshell is what you can expect in company law.